The morning sun cast long shadows through the crystal trees of Kepler 442b, as Commander Vexthara led her patrol deeper into the forest. Her 6 legs moved with practiced silence across the rocky ground, while her compound eyes scanned the area for any signs of danger. The other 5 members of her squad followed behind, their insect-like bodies covered in dark armor that gleamed in the filtered sunlight. "Stay alert," Vexthara clicked to her soldiers through their communication devices. The mining crews reported strange sounds in this sector yesterday. Corporal Zickville, her second in command, moved up beside her. "What kind of sounds, Commander?" "Roaring. Deep and loud." The workers were too scared to continue their shift. Vexthara paused at a cluster of purple crystal formations. "Command thinks we might have apex predators in this area." The Zephyrian Empire had been mining this world for 3 months now. Their technology was far superior to anything the native species could produce. The humans who lived here had been easily defeated and put to work in the labor camps. At least, that was what the report said. Vexthara had never actually seen combat with the humans. By the time she arrived with the occupation forces, the fighting was already over. She had heard stories, though. The humans were said to be weak, creatures who walked on only 2 legs. They had no natural weapons like claws or stingers. Their technology was primitive. The conquest had been swift and complete, or so everyone believed. A distant sound echoed through the trees, deep and thunderous, like the roar of some massive beast. Vexthara's antennae twitched as she tried to locate the source. "Did you hear that?" she asked her squad. "Yes, Commander," Zickville replied. "It came from the northeast." "Move carefully. We don't know what we're dealing with." The patrol advanced through the crystal forest, their weapons ready. The trees here grew in strange formations, their translucent trunks allowing light to pass through in rainbow patterns. It was beautiful, but it also provided countless hiding places for predators. Another roar split the air, closer this time. Then another and another. The sounds seemed to come from different directions, suggesting a pack of creatures working together. "Commander," whispered Private Hexstar from the rear of the formation, "I think we're being watched." Vexthara stopped and listened. The forest had gone quiet, except for the soft whisper of wind through the crystal branches. No bird calls, no insect buzzes. Even the small creatures that usually scurried through the undergrowth had gone silent. "Zickville, take point. Hexstar, watch our rear. Everyone else, stay tight." They moved forward for another 100 meters before the first member of their patrol disappeared. Private Nexther was there one moment, scanning the left flank, and gone the next. No scream, no warning. Just empty space where a soldier had been standing. "Nexther," Vexthara called out. "Report!" Silence. "Spread out, find him." The squad split up to search the immediate area. Vexthara found disturbed ground where something had been dragged away, but the trail disappeared at a rocky outcrop. There was no blood, no sign of struggle. Whatever had taken Nexther had done so with incredible stealth. Another roar echoed through the trees, seeming to mock their search efforts. "Regroup," Vexthara ordered. "Whatever's out there, it's hunting us." The remaining 4 soldiers formed a defensive circle, their weapons pointing outward. They were elite troops of the Zephyrian Empire, trained for combat on dozens of worlds. But this felt different. The predators here seemed to understand military tactics. "Movement in the trees," Zickville reported. 2 o'clock. Vexthara looked but saw nothing. The crystal formations reflected light in confusing patterns, making it hard to distinguish between shadows and real threats. A thunderous roar erupted from behind them. As they spun around, Private Kexelin vanished from the formation. One moment she was there, the next she was gone, leaving only a faint disturbance in the air. "This is impossible," muttered Private Texmar. "How can something that size move so quietly?" "Maybe it's not size," Vexthara replied grimly. "Maybe it's intelligence." She activated her communication device to contact the base. "Command, this is Patrol 7. We are under attack by unknown predators. 2 soldiers missing, requesting immediate backup." Static filled the channel. Then a voice crackled through. Patrol 7, your signal is breaking up. Repeat your message. I said we're under attack. Send reinforcements to Sector 7 Alpha. Patrol 7, we're getting interference. Your last transmission was unclear. Vexthara realized that something was jamming their communications. But how could wild animals interfere with their advanced technology? Another roar split the air, followed immediately by a different sound. This one was shorter, sharper. It reminded Vexthara of something, but she couldn't place what. Commander, Zickval said quietly, I don't think these are ordinary predators. What do you mean? The pattern of attacks. The way they're isolating us, it's like they're using military tactics. Before Vexthara could respond, Texmar disappeared. This time she caught a glimpse of movement in her peripheral vision. Something dark and fast, moving between the crystal trees with impossible stealth. Fall back to the rocks, she ordered. We need cover. She and Zickval moved toward a cluster of large crystal formations that would protect their backs. The roaring sounds continued around them, sometimes close, sometimes distant. It was impossible to tell how many creatures they were facing. There! Zickval pointed his weapon toward a gap between two crystal trees. I saw something move. Vexthara aimed her energy rifle at the spot. The weapon could burn through solid rock, but she needed a clear target. Whatever was hunting them was too smart to show itself openly. A new sound reached her ears, softer than the roars, but somehow more chilling. It sounded almost like voices, but that was impossible. The intelligence report said the local fauna was non-sentient. Commander, Zickval whispered, do you hear that? Hear what? Listen carefully. Vexthara strained her hearing. There it was again, faint, but definitely there. It sounded like communication of some kind. Not the simple calls of animals, but complex exchanges of information. They're talking to each other, she breathed. But what kind of predator can talk? The answer came to her in a flash of terrible understanding. The missing patrol members. The tactical approach to the attacks. The communication jamming. The coordinated assault. They're not predators, she said slowly. They're soldiers. As if responding to her words, another roar echoed through the forest. But this time, Vexthara heard it differently. Not the call of a wild beast, but the sound of a weapon. Being fired. We need to move, now. She and Zickval began a fighting retreat toward the edge of the forest. Behind them, the roaring sounds continued, sometimes single shots, sometimes in rapid succession. Whatever was hunting them had weapons that produced those thunderous noises. As they reached the forest edge, Vexthara looked back at the crystal. Trees. Somewhere in there, intelligent beings were using the terrain to their advantage, picking off her patrol one by one. Beings who roared like monsters but fought like trained soldiers. The implications were staggering. If these weren't wild animals, then what were they? And why had no one warned her patrol about intelligent hostiles in this sector? As she and Zickval made their way back to base, one thought kept running through her mind. Whoever was in those forests, they weren't just smart. They were winning. The command center buzzed with activity as Vexthara finished her report. Captain Zicktar, the colony's chief scientist, studied the data on his screen with growing interest. His compound eyes reflected the blue light from the display as he analyzed. The patrol sensor readings. 3 soldiers lost in under 2 hours, he clicked thoughtfully. The attack patterns show remarkable sophistication. Commander Jexmore, the base commander, paced behind his desk. His large frame cast shadows across the room as he moved. Sophisticated or not, they're just animals. We'll send out hunting parties with heavy weapons. Sir, with respect, I don't think these are ordinary animals, Vexthara said. The way they moved, the tactics they used, it was like fighting trained soldiers. Jexmore's antennae twitched with irritation. Trained soldiers? On this primitive world? The humans were defeated months ago. Their technology is centuries behind ours, but what if some of them escaped? What if they're still fighting? Impossible. Our orbital scans show no large human settlements. No weapons manufacturing, no military installations. Jexmore stopped pacing and fixed Vexthara with his gaze. You're letting fear cloud your judgment, Commander. Captain Ziktar cleared his throat. Actually, sir, there are some unusual aspects to consider. The sound recordings from the patrol don't match any known animal calls in our database. Then add them to the database, Jexmore snapped. We're dealing with local wildlife, nothing more. Meanwhile, 30 kilometers away in the abandoned mining facility, Sergeant Danny Rodriguez checked his rifle for the third time that morning. The weapon was a modified version of standard Earth military equipment, altered to work with scavenged Zephyrian power cells. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done. How many did we get yesterday? Asked Corporal Lisa Hayes as she cleaned her shotgun. 3 confirmed, maybe 4, Danny replied. Jake thinks he winged one during the retreat, but we couldn't stick around to check. Private Jake Turner looked up from where he was working on their communication equipment. Their patrol patterns are getting more cautious. They're starting to learn. Good, said Private Amy Chun from her position by the window. Let them learn to be afraid. The abandoned facility had been their home for 2 months now. When the Zephyrians invaded, most of the human population had been rounded up and sent to labor camps. But a small group of Marines and colonists had escaped into the wilderness. They had been fighting a guerrilla war ever since Danny walked over to a table covered with maps and photos. Pete, how are we doing on supplies? Engineer Pete Foster looked up from his work on a damaged scope. We've got enough ammunition for maybe 2 more major engagements. Food will last another week if we're careful. And medical supplies? Danny asked. Medic Carol Santos shook her head. Running low on everything. We need to hit another supply convoy soon. Danny nodded grimly. They were winning small battles, but the war was far from over. Every day brought new challenges, new risks. The Zephyrians had better technology, more soldiers, and complete control of the planet's resources, but the humans had something the aliens didn't understand: the will to fight against impossible odds. Lisa, Amy, you're with me tonight, Danny sighed. We're going to scout the northern patrol route. Jake, keep monitoring their communications. Roger that, Sarge. Back at the Zephyrian base, Captain Ziktar was having his own problems. The more he studied the attack data, the more convinced he became that they were dealing with something extraordinary. Look at this, he said to his assistant, Lieutenant Vexkal. The timing of the attack shows perfect coordination. Multiple groups working together, communicating in real time. But sir, animals don't coordinate like this. Exactly. And look at these movement patterns. Ziktar highlighted several routes on the tactical display. They're using the terrain to maximum advantage. They know where our sensors have blind spots. Vexkal leaned closer to the screen. How could they know that? Either they've been watching US for a long time, or they understand our technology better than we thought. The 2 scientists worked late into the night, analyzing every piece of data from the lost patrol. The more they discovered, the more disturbing the picture became. Sir, Vexkal said finally, what if Commander Vextara was right? What if these aren't animals at all? Ziktar was quiet for a long moment. If they're not animals, then what are they? The answer came at dawn when the Northern Patrol failed to report in. Commander Vextara led the search team that found the wreckage. 3 military vehicles lay scattered across a rocky valley, their armor melted by intense heat. The bodies of 6 soldiers were found nearby, all killed by precise shots to vital areas. This wasn't a random attack, she reported to the command center. Someone knew exactly where to hit our vehicles to disable them, someone who understands our technology. Impossible, Jexmore replied over the radio. No creature on this planet has that kind of knowledge. Then maybe it's not a creature from this planet, Vextara said quietly. The investigation team spread out across the attack site. They found evidence of careful planning, prepared firing positions, escape routes, even signs that the attackers had studied the patrol schedule. Commander, called Sergeant Nextall from behind a large rock, you need to see this. Vextara approached the position where the sergeant was kneeling. In the dirt, someone had drawn symbols with a stick. They were crude but clearly deliberate. What do you think they mean? Nextall asked. Vextara studied the markings. They looked almost like writing, but not in any language she recognized. Take pictures, send them to Captain Ziktar for analysis. As the team prepared to leave, they heard the sound that had become all too familiar. A deep, thunderous roar echoing from the hills around them. Everyone back to the vehicles, Vexthara ordered, now. But as they moved toward their transport, more roars came from different directions. They were surrounded. Defensive positions, Vexthara commanded. Watch for movement. The team formed a circle around their vehicles, weapons ready. But minutes passed with no attack. The roaring sounds continued, sometimes near, sometimes far, but no enemy showed themselves. What are they waiting for? Whispered Nextall. Maybe they're studying us, Vexthara replied. Just like we're trying to study them, the thought was deeply unsettling. If these creatures were intelligent enough to study their enemies, what else were they capable of? After 20 tense minutes, the roaring sounds faded away. The team was able to return to base without incident, but the message was clear: whoever was out there, they could strike when and where they chose. That night, Captain Ziktar called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. I've analyzed the symbols found at the attack site, he announced. They're not random marks. They show mathematical relationships, spatial awareness, and abstract thinking. What does that mean? Asked Commander Jexmore. It means we're dealing with beings that can think, plan, and communicate complex ideas. Whether they're native to this planet or not, they're definitely intelligent. You're saying these are the humans? Vexthara asked. I'm saying it's possible. The attack patterns, the tactical knowledge, the ability to understand our technology, it all points to beings with military training. Jexmore slammed his fist on the table. The humans were defeated. We have them all in the labor camps. Do we? Ziktar asked quietly. Have we actually counted them? Do we know for certain that every human on this planet is accounted for? The room fell silent. In the rush to establish the mining operation, had anyone bothered to verify that the conquest was complete? I want a full audit of all prisoners, Jexmore said finally. And I want increased patrols around the perimeter. If there are humans out there, we're going to find them. But even as he gave the orders, Jexmore couldn't shake the feeling that they were already being watched. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the base, intelligent eyes were studying their every move. Planning their next attack, the roars they had dismissed as animal sounds were something far more dangerous. They were the battle cries of an enemy that refused to surrender. The supply convoy moved slowly through the mountain pass, its 6 heavily armored vehicles carrying medical supplies and ammunition to the outer mining camps. Commander Vexthara rode in the lead vehicle, her eyes scanning the rocky slopes on both sides of the narrow road. Perfect place for an ambush, she muttered to her driver. Should we request air support? Corporal Zikval asked from the gunner's position. Command denied the request. They say our air units are needed elsewhere? Vexthara checked her weapon for the 4th time that morning. We're on our own. 3 kilometers ahead, hidden behind a cluster of boulders, Jake Turner adjusted his rifle scope and spoke quietly into his radio. Danny, convoy is approaching checkpoint Alpha. 6 vehicles, heavy escort. Copy that, Jake. Remember, we only get one shot at this. Amy, are you in position? Affirmative, came Amy Chun's voice over the radio. Ready to block their escape. Root, Lisa, what's your status? In position and ready, Lisa Hayes replied. Pete's charges are set. Just give the word. Danny Rodriguez lay flat behind a rock formation, watching the convoy through his binoculars. 2 months of hit-and-run attacks had taught him to read Zephyrian patrol patterns. They were getting smarter, but they still followed predictable routes. Wait for my signal, he whispered into his radio. Let them get fully into the kill zone. The convoy entered the narrow section of the pass where the road curved between high rock walls. It was here that the humans had spent 3 days preparing their trap. Now, Danny said calmly, the world exploded into chaos. Pete Fostos carefully. Place charges detonated along the convoy's flanks, sending rocks tumbling down to block both ends of the pass. The thunderous roar of the explosions echoed off the canyon walls. Jake Turner's rifle barked from his elevated position, its deep boom adding to the noise. His first shot disabled the lead vehicle's engine, bringing the convoy to a stop. His second shot took out the communications array on the command vehicle. Contact front? Vexthura shouted as her vehicle shuddered to a halt. Dismount and take cover! The Zephyrian soldiers poured out of their vehicles, seeking shelter behind the armored hulls. But the humans had planned for this. Amy Chun opened fire from the opposite side of the pass, her shotgun's roar forcing the aliens to split their attention. Where are they shooting from? Zikval called out, trying to locate the source of the attacks. Everywhere! Vexthara replied, ducking as another shot sparked off the metal beside her head. Lisa Hayes moved through the rocks like a ghost, her weapon adding its voice to the symphony of destruction. Each shot was carefully aimed, each position carefully chosen. The humans used every advantage the terrain provided. We're pinned down, reported the commander of the rear guard. Request immediate backup. Negative, Vexthara replied. Communications are jammed. We're on our own. The battle raged for 20 minutes. The Zephyrians had superior armor and weapons, but the humans had position and knowledge of the terrain. Every time the aliens tried to advance, rifle fire from the rocks drove them back. I'm running low on ammunition, Jake reported over the radio. Same here, Amy replied. We need to wrap this up. Danny made a decision that would change everything. Jake, fall back to position, Bravo. Amy, Lisa, begin withdrawal. I'll cover. What about you, Sarge? Lisa asked. I'll be right behind you. Go. But as Jake Turner moved from his position, disaster struck. A loose rock gave way under his weight, sending him tumbling down the slope. He hit the ground hard, his rifle spinning away into the rocks. Pain shot through his left leg as he tried to stand. Jake's down! Amy shouted over the radio from her position behind the convoy. Vexthara saw the figure fall. For the first time in the battle, she had a clear view of one of their attackers. Her compound eyes focused on the wounded human, and she felt a shock of recognition. It was definitely a human. Not some unknown predator, but one of the species they had conquered months ago. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Zikval, look at Sector 7, she called to her second-in-command. Tell me what you see. The corporal raised his scope and studied the area where Jake had fallen. I see ... It looks like one of the humans from the labor camps. Exactly. We're not fighting monsters. We're fighting the humans we thought we had defeated. Jake Turner dragged himself behind a boulder, his leg screaming in pain. His rifle was gone, lost somewhere in the rocks above. All he had left was his sidearm and 2 spare magazines. Danny, I'm cut off, he whispered into his radio. Can't reach the extraction point? Hold tight, Jake. We're coming for you. Negative. You'll just get yourselves killed. Complete the mission. But Danny Rodriguez had not survived 2 months of guerrilla warfare by abandoning his people. Amy, Lisa, suppress the enemy. I'm going after Jake. Danny, no, Lisa shouted. It's suicide. That's an order, Corporal. The Zephyrians saw Danny moving among the rocks, a dark figure leaping from cover to cover with incredible speed. They tried to track him with their weapons, but he moved like water, flowing around obstacles and using every shadow to his advantage. There, Zikval pointed. Another one! Vexthara watched in fascination as the human warrior moved through terrain that would challenge even a trained Zephyrian soldier. The way he used the rocks for cover, the timing of his movements, the tactical awareness he displayed, it was like watching a master at work. He's trying to reach the wounded one, she realized. Should we stop him? Vexthara hesitated. Part of her wanted to capture these humans alive, to understand how they had survived and organized this resistance. But another part of her was genuinely curious to see what the human would do next. Danny reached Jake's position just as the Zephyrian patrol began moving up the slope. Can you move? He asked. Not without help, Jake replied through gritted teeth. My leg's busted. Then we do this the hard way. Danny pulled out his sidearm and checked the magazine. Time to reload. The words were spoken quietly, almost to himself, but Vexthara's enhanced hearing picked them up through her audio sensors. Two simple words that changed everything she thought she knew about this conflict. Time to reload. Not the roar of a wild beast, but the calm preparation of a professional soldier. Someone who understood weapons, tactics, and the reality of combat. Someone who had been trained to fight. "Zickville," she said urgently, "are you recording this?" "Yes." "Commander, why?" "Because we just learned something important." "Listen to what that human just said." Danny helped Jake to his feet, supporting his weight as they began moving toward the extraction point. Behind them, the Zephyrian patrol was closing in, their weapons ready. "Contact rear!" shouted the lead alien soldier. Danny spun around, his pistol coming up with practiced ease. The weapons report echoed off the canyon walls, another roar in the symphony of battle. But this time, Vexthara heard it differently. She heard the sound of a weapon being fired by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Fall back to the vehicles," she ordered her troops. "Let them go." "Commander?" Zickville looked confused. "We have them pinned down." "No, we don't. We're the ones who are pinned down. Look around you, Corporal." "Look at this battlefield." Zickville surveyed the scene with new eyes. The convoy was trapped in a narrow pass, their vehicles disabled, their communications cut. The humans had chosen the perfect location for an ambush and executed it with military precision. "They're not just fighting us," Vexthara continued. "They're outfighting us." As Danny and Jake disappeared into the rocks, supported by covering fire from Amy and Lisa, Vexthara made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. "Command, this is Convoy 7. We need to talk. The situation has changed." "Convoy 7, report your status." "We've made contact with organized human resistance fighters. They're using military tactics and coordinated attacks. The threat assessment needs to be revised immediately." There was a long pause before the response came. "Are you saying the humans are still fighting?" "I'm saying they never stopped fighting, and they're better at it than we thought." The convoy limped back to base that evening, carrying wounded soldiers and shattered assumptions. The roars they had been hearing weren't the calls of wild predators. They were the sounds of war, conducted by an enemy that refused to accept defeat. In the abandoned mining facility, Danny Rodriguez tended to Jake Turner's injured leg while the others cleaned their weapons and counted their ammunition. "Good work. Today," he told his team, "we sent them a message." "What message?" Amy asked. "That we're still here. That we're still fighting, and that we're not going to stop." Outside in the darkness, the night sounds of Kepler 442b seemed different now. Every crack of a branch, every whisper of wind through the rocks, carried the possibility of human resistance fighters moving through the shadows. The Zephyrians were beginning to understand that they hadn't conquered this world after all. They had only won the first battle of a war that was far from over. Commander Jexmore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Red markers showed 17 separate attacks over the past week, each one more sophisticated than the last. The evidence was overwhelming, but he still refused to accept what his officers were telling him. "You're asking me to believe that a handful of primitive humans have been outsmarting our best soldiers," he said to Captain Zicktar. "The evidence speaks for itself, sir," Zicktar replied, highlighting another section of the map. "Coordinated attacks, advanced tactical knowledge, precise timing. These aren't random acts of violence." Vexthara stepped forward with a datapad in her hands. "Sir, I've compiled a complete analysis of all recent incidents. The pattern is clear. We're dealing with trained military personnel." "Impossible," Jexmore snapped. "Our intelligence reports show that all human military forces were eliminated during the initial invasion." "Then our intelligence was wrong," Vexthara said firmly. "Some of them escaped. Some of them are still fighting. Even if that's true, they're just delaying the inevitable. We have superior technology, more soldiers, complete control of the planet's resources. What can a few scattered humans possibly accomplish?" The answer came 2 hours later when the power went out across the entire base. In the abandoned mining facility, Pete Foster watched the Zephyrian base through his binoculars as the lights flickered and died. Direct hit on the main power junction, he reported into his radio. The charges worked perfectly. Good work, Pete, Danny Rodriguez replied. Phase 2 is a go. Amy, Lisa, begin your approach to the communication center. Roger that, Sarge, Amy Chun whispered as she and Lisa Hayes moved through the darkness toward their target. The plan they were executing had taken 2 weeks to prepare. While the Zephyrians focused on hunting them in the wilderness, the humans had been studying the alien base, learning its weaknesses, identifying critical systems. Jake, how's the leg? Danny asked as he checked his weapon one final time. Good. Enough to fight, Jake Turner replied from his position at the observation post. His injured leg was still tender, but he could move when needed. Perimeter guards are confused. They're running around like insects with their heads cut off. Perfect. Carol, are you ready for the medical bay infiltration? As ready as I'll ever be, Carol Santos replied. She carried a medical bag filled with supplies stolen from previous raids. But her real mission was to reach the human prisoners in the detention center. Danny took a deep breath. Tonight would either be their greatest victory or their final defeat. But they had no choice. The Zephyrians were getting closer to finding their hideout. It was time to take the fight directly to the enemy. Remember, this isn't about destroying their base, he reminded his team. It's about showing them that nowhere is safe, that we can strike anywhere, anytime. Inside the darkened Zephyrian command center, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as the staff tried to restore power. Commander Jexmore paced back and forth, his anger growing with each passing minute. How long until we have full power restored? He demanded. At least 2 hours, sir, replied the chief engineer. The humans targeted the main junction perfectly. They knew exactly where to hit us. Impossible. Our base schematics are classified. Sir, Vexthara interrupted, what if they've been watching us? Learning our routines, studying our defenses? For how long? Since the day we arrived. The thought was deeply disturbing. If the humans had been observing them for months, they would know everything about the base layout, guard rotations, weak points in their security. Sir, called out a communications officer, we're receiving reports of intruders in sections 7 and 12. Intruders? Jexmore turned toward the officer. How many? Unknown, sir. They're moving too fast for our sensors to get accurate counts. Amy Chun and Lisa Hayes moved through the darkened corridors of the communications center like ghosts. Their knowledge of the building's layout, gained through weeks of careful observation, allowed them to avoid the main patrol routes. Guard post ahead, Lisa whispered, pointing to a junction where 2 hallways met. Amy nodded and pulled out a small device Pete had built from scavenged parts. It would jam the guard's radio for exactly 30 seconds, long enough for them to pass undetected. They activated the device and slipped past the confused guard, who was trying to figure out why his radio had suddenly gone silent. By the time his communications came back online, the 2 humans were already 3 corridors away. Target room is just ahead, Amy whispered as they approached the main communication hub. The door was sealed with an electronic lock, but Pete had prepared for this too. Lisa attached a small device to the control panel and waited as it analyzed the security code. After 20 seconds, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, banks of communication equipment lined the walls, their displays glowing softly in the darkness. This was the nerve center of Zephyrian operations on the planet. Place the charges here, here, and here, Amy said, pointing to specific pieces of equipment. We want to disable their communications but not completely destroy the room. As they worked, Lisa kept watch at the door. Movement in the hallway, she reported. Looks like a patrol. How long do we need? Amy asked as she attached the last charge. 30 seconds. Do it. Amy activated the timer and they slipped out of the room just as the patrol rounded the corner. The 2 humans pressed themselves against the wall in a shadowy alcove, holding their breath as the Zephyrian soldiers passed by. Meanwhile, Carol Santos had reached the detention center through a maintenance tunnel that Pete had discovered weeks earlier. The facility held over 200 human prisoners, mostly civilians captured during the initial invasion. Can you hear me? She whispered to the prisoner in the first cell. The man looked up in surprise. You're not one of them. My name is Carol. I'm with the Resistance. We're going to get you out of here. Resistance? You mean there are still humans fighting? More than you might think. But I need information. How many guards are there? What are their patrol schedules? The prisoner, a middle-aged engineer named Bob Clark, quickly filled her in on the security arrangements. There are usually 4 guards on duty at night. They check the cells every hour. Perfect. When the power comes back on, be ready to move. We're going to cause a distraction. At exactly 2:30 a.m., the charges placed throughout the base detonated simultaneously. Not enough to cause serious damage, but sufficient to disable key systems and create chaos. The communication center went dark. Emergency alarms began wailing. Security systems failed throughout the complex. All units report to your emergency stations. Jexmore ordered over the base's internal communication system, but many of his soldiers couldn't hear the order. The communication hub was offline, cutting off contact with large sections of the base. Sir, Vexthara said urgently, this is a coordinated attack. They're hitting multiple targets simultaneously. How many of them are there? I don't know, but they're moving with military precision. Look at the timing of these attacks. Everything happened within seconds of each other. Danny Rodriguez watched the chaos from his position on a hill overlooking the base. Lights flickered on and off as the Zephyrians tried to restore power. Soldiers ran between buildings, unsure of where the next attack might come from. Beautiful, he murmured into his radio. Absolutely beautiful. All teams begin withdrawal. Mission accomplished. One by one, his team members reported successful completion of their objectives. Amy and Lisa had disabled the communication center. Carol had made contact with the prisoners and gathered intelligence about the detention facility. Pete had knocked out the main power grid, but the real victory wasn't the physical damage they had caused. It was the psychological impact. They had penetrated the heart of Zephyrian operations, struck at will, and disappeared back into the night. Jake, any signs of pursuit? Danny asked as they regrouped at the extraction point. Negative, Sarge. They're still running around trying to figure out what hit them. As the team made their way back to their hideout, Danny felt a grim satisfaction. Tonight had proven something important, both to his own people and to the enemy. The humans weren't just surviving, they weren't just resisting. They were winning. Inside the damaged command center, Vexthara studied the reports coming in from across the base. The attacks had been perfectly coordinated, striking at exactly the right targets to cause maximum disruption with minimal casualties. This wasn't random, she said to Captain Ziktar. Someone planned this operation down to the smallest detail. Someone with extensive military training, Ziktar agreed. Someone who understands our weaknesses better than we understand them ourselves. Commander Jexmore stood in the center of the room, his confidence shaken for the first time since arriving. On this planet, the humans had just demonstrated that they could strike anywhere, anytime, despite all of his security measures. Sir, Vexthara said quietly, we need to reassess our entire approach to this situation. What do you mean? I mean, we're not fighting scattered survivors hiding in caves. We're fighting an organized military force that's been studying us, learning from us and adapting to our tactics. And they're getting stronger, Ziktar added. Every attack teaches them more about our capabilities and limitations. Jexmore looked around at his damaged command center. 3 days after the base attack, Commander Jexmore made a decision that would determine the fate of both species on Kepler 442b. He ordered a massive assault on the human resistance, deploying every available soldier and piece of equipment. I want them found and eliminated, he told his assembled officers. No more games, no more surprises. We end this today. Vexthara stood at the back of the briefing room, her concerns growing with each word. Sir, with respect, perhaps we should consider negotiating with them instead of fighting. Negotiate? Jexmore's compound eyes fixed on her. With terrorists who attack our facilities and kill our soldiers? They're not terrorists, sir. They're defending their homeworld? There's a difference. The only difference that matters is that we have superior firepower. Today we use it. The massive Zephyrian force moved out at dawn, over 300 soldiers, in armored vehicles, supported by air units and heavy weapons. Their target was the suspected location of the human hideout, in the abandoned mining facility, but Danny Rodriguez had been expecting this. His network of observers had reported the military buildup hours earlier. "They're coming in force," he told his team as they gathered in the main chamber of their underground base. "This is it, the final battle. How many?" Lisa Hayes asked as she checked her weapon. "Everything they have. 300 soldiers, maybe more." Amy Chun whistled softly. "Against the 6 of us?" 7, Jake Turner corrected, limping over to join the group despite his injured leg. "I'm not sitting this one out." "Jake, you can barely walk," Carol Santos protested. "I can still shoot." "That's all that matters." Danny looked around at his small team, 7 humans against an entire army. The odds were impossible, but they had been fighting impossible odds since the day the invasion began. "We have 2 choices," he said quietly. "We can run and try to hide somewhere else, or we can make our stand here." "What do you think we should do, Sarge?" Pete Foster asked. Danny was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. They could retreat deeper into the wilderness, continue their guerrilla campaign for a few more weeks or months. But eventually, they would be caught. The Zephyrians were learning their tactics, adapting their strategies. "We fight," he said finally. "But not the way they expect." "What do you mean?" "They're expecting us to hide, to use hit and run tactics like we always have. Instead, we're going to meet them head on." Amy frowned. "Danny, that's suicide. We can't win a straight fight." "We're not trying to win. We're trying to send a message." 2 hours later, the Zephyrian force surrounded the abandoned mining facility. Commander Jexmore studied the buildings through his binoculars, looking for any sign of movement. "Scanners show multiple heat signatures inside the main building," reported his intelligence officer. "They're definitely in there." "Good. Deploy the heavy weapons." "I want that building reduced to rubble." "Sir," Vexthura interrupted, "shouldn't we try to capture them alive? They might have valuable intelligence." "The time for intelligence gathering is over, Commander. Today we finish this." But as the Zephyrian forces prepared their assault, something unexpected happened. The front door of the main building opened, and a single human figure walked out. Danny Rodriguez stood in the morning sunlight, his rifle held at his side, facing an army that outnumbered him 50-1. He wore his torn military uniform with pride, the insignia of Earth's armed forces visible on his chest. "What is he doing?" Jexmore muttered. Behind Danny, the other members of his team emerged from the building. Lisa Hayes, Amy Chun, Jake Turner limping but determined, Pete Foster and Carol Santos. 7 humans standing together against impossible odds. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "they're transmitting on an open channel. Put it through." Danny's voice came over the speakers, clear and strong. "Commander Jexmore, this is Sergeant Danny Rodriguez of the Human Resistance. I'm requesting a meeting." "You're in no position to make requests, human," Jexmore replied. "I think I am." "Your forces are surrounding us, but we're not hiding anymore. We're standing right here in the open." "That should tell you something." Vexthara stepped forward. "Sir, let me talk to him." "Absolutely not, sir. They came out voluntarily. They're not running or hiding. Maybe they want to surrender. Or maybe it's a trap." "With respect, sir, what kind of trap could 7 humans set against our entire army?" Jexmore considered this. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but I'm coming with you, and we're bringing a full escort." 20 minutes later, a group of Zephyrian officers approached the humans under a flag of truce. Jexmore and Vexthara led the group, flanked by armed guards. "You wanted to talk?" Jexmore said when they were close enough. "Talk?" Danny looked at the alien commander, then at Vexthara, who he recognized from previous encounters. 3 months ago, you invaded our world. You thought you had won a quick victory. "We did win," Jexmore said. "Your resistance is finished." "Is it?" Danny gestured to his small team. 7 people have been fighting your entire occupation force for months. We've hit your patrols, disabled your equipment, disrupted your operations. Does that sound like defeat to you? You've been nothing more than an annoyance. Then why are you here with 300 soldiers to deal with 7 people? The question hung in the air. Vexthara felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the implications. You want to know the real reason we came out here? Danny continued. It's not because we're surrendering. It's because we wanted you to see us, to understand what you're really fighting. And what is that? Vexthara asked. The human spirit. The thing you can never defeat, no matter how many soldiers you bring or how advanced your technology is. Danny looked directly at Jexmore. You thought the roars you heard were monsters. You were right. We are monsters, but not the kind you expected. We're the monsters that rise up when our families are threatened, when our freedom is taken away, when we're pushed to the point where we have nothing left to lose. Enough speeches, Jexmore snapped. Surrender now, and I might consider sparing your lives. No, Danny said simply. No, we're not surrendering. We're not running. We're done hiding. If you want to finish this, then finish it. But understand what you're doing. You're not just killing 7 soldiers, you're creating martyrs. Behind Danny, his team stood ready. Each of them had made their choice. They would rather die fighting than live as prisoners. Every human in those labor camps is watching, Amy Chun said, speaking for the first time. Every human on this planet will know what happened here today. And, they'll remember, Lisa Hayes added. They'll remember that 7 people stood up to an entire army. Vexthara studied the humans' faces. She saw no fear, no doubt. Only determination and an unshakable belief in what they were fighting for. Sir, she said quietly to Jexmore, maybe we should reconsider our approach. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we've been fighting the wrong war. Look at them. They're not afraid to die. How do you defeat an enemy that's not afraid to die? You kill them. And then what? What happens when the other humans learn that 7 people died fighting 300 soldiers? Do you think that will make them more willing to accept our rule or more willing to resist? Jexmore considered this. Around them, hundreds of Zephyrian soldiers waited for orders. One word from him would end the resistance forever, but Vexthara was right. Killing these humans would not end the resistance. It would inspire it. What are you proposing? He asked Danny. A new arrangement. You leave our people alone, we'll leave yours alone. Withdraw your forces to designated areas, release the prisoners, and let us govern ourselves. That's not conquest. That's coexistence. Sometimes coexistence is better than endless war. The negotiation took 3 hours. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Zephyrians would maintain control of the mining operations, but would release the human prisoners and allow them to establish their own settlements in designated areas. It wasn't everything the humans wanted, but it was a beginning. As the agreement was signed, Vexthara approached Danny privately. I have to ask, were you really prepared to die here today? Danny smiled grimly. Commander, we've been prepared to die since the day you arrived. The difference is, today we were prepared to die for something bigger than ourselves. And what's that? The idea that freedom is worth fighting for, no matter what the odds? As the Zephyrian forces withdrew, the 7 humans stood together in the fading sunlight. They had done the impossible. 7 people had forced an empire to negotiate, so what happens now? Jake asked. Now we rebuild, Danny replied. And we make sure this never happens again. In the distance, the first group of released prisoners emerged from the Zephyrian transports, walking toward freedom. The roars that had once terrified an alien army had become the battle cry of liberation. The humans had proven that sometimes the smallest voice, when it refuses to be silenced, can change the course of history. Even when that voice whispers something as simple as reload.